If you've always wanted to learn more about moisture problems, dew points, vapor barriers, well, this show is for you. Hi, this is Daniel Lakstins, and you're listening to the Roofing Business Builder Podcast. In today's show, we're talking about moisture inside that roof. When it comes to re-roofing a roof, it can be really dangerous. If there's water still in it, we encapsulate that water and then it turns into vapor. We've heard of things like vapor barriers, vapor retardants. Now we talk about some other things, but I have a special guest on the show. His name is Stan Volkman. And Stan Volkman's been in the roofing industry for over 40 years. Now, before I introduce that segment of the show, let's do an intention for this week. This week's intention is, I can find solutions to any problem. I can find solutions to any problem. And this is a great intention to hold, because sometimes when we are up against something challenging that we've never seen before, it can be daunting and fearful. But if you hold in the back of your mind that, but I can find the solution to any problem. There's so many things available to you. Even just watching some of my podcasts here with the Roofing Business Builder, there's plenty of solutions available to all of us. And now that we have iPhones or smartphones, any of us can find those solutions right away. So just hold that intention and know that the answer to any problem is out there. All right, so today we're talking about moisture inside the roof and how we can prevent that from causing problems with a newly installed system. And so, although we talk about many other things, my special guest today is Stan Volkman. Stan Volkman is the president of Skyline Consultants and Building Services, LLC. And he's been in the roofing industry for over 40 years. And the things that he's seen, the things that he has learned, he's going to share some of those things with us today. Let's look into my interview with Stan. So Stan, welcome to the show. So glad to have you on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
But you are a professional in the commercial roofing industry when it comes to actually an area that I haven't interviewed anyone in your position yet, but you're a roof consultant, right?
Yeah, I'm a little bit of a combo. I've been a roofing contractor since 1978, but I specialize in roof coatings and restoration work. And restoration's different than replacement.
Yeah.
You have to make sure what you have is restorable and then know how to do it. So what I found in 2000 is we started doing more consulting because we found an educated consumer was a better consumer to work with.
Uh-huh.
And so we started doing the consulting and educating, going to customers and educating them on how to properly restore and what's a realistic life expectancy. And not everything's restorable. So we just started moving towards the consulting at that point, and I do some consulting for a company that makes heat guns and robots for commercial roofing, and I do some consulting for some multi-housing and some other contractors as well. So those that want to get into the restoration but want to have somebody that's got some experience to support them with good logical education, try to keep them out of trouble.
That's awesome. And it's really a niche, though. You know, I talk about niches a lot, but I never mention how restoration is also another exciting niche to be in. But I tell you, you have to know what you're doing, right? When you're doing restoration.
You do. There's, you got to make sure what you have because you're trying to restore what's in place. And many times you're at that point because there's been some failures in how it performs.
Uh-huh.
But the roof is also showing you all its weaknesses. So if you go in there and fix the weaknesses and fix the way it's supposed to perform, like disperse water and get rid of water and those types of things, then you can restore it. It'll last a long time. And if you use the right products to restore it, then you can come back when it's appropriate and wash that and apply more coating. And it saves the customer a lot of cost. We don't fill the landfills with a bunch of good roofing materials.
Mm-hmm.
We just tear out the bad stuff and then we restore it, and as opposed to tearing everything off and replacing it. So it's less obtrusive or invasive to the customer and the business at the time, and you can do it with a smaller crew.
Absolutely. And, sometimes I would refer to people that do what you're saying, that description. It's actually, in a sense, recycling the roof, because, if you already have ISO, polyiso, sanuret insulation, whatever the insulation is on that roof. Now, granted, it's not going to have the same resistance as it did when it was brand new. But the point is it's better to be up there resisting heat than in a landfill. So in a sense, it's kind of like recycling without the need of recycling. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so when we're done restoring a roof, it functions correctly. It now can get the maximum life out of the products you use to restore it. Where if you don't fix the function, all you're going to do is do a temporary Band-Aid. And that's why roof coatings and restoration work has bad names, because a lot of people get into it and just think they can cover up anything. And that's not the way it works. There's actually a science behind it.
Yeah. So, and you also specialize in forensics.
Yep. I've worked in Minnesota, so we have a lot of really cold, long durations of cold weather, which has created a lot of condensation and vapor drive issues.
Mm-hmm.
So we've become very good at being able to diagnose vapor drive and where to put the insulation, what kind of insulation to have, how to stop that vapor drive, so that you can, because a lot of buildings today have to humidify their inside airspace because they use a lot of computers in manufacturing. I found this out when I was managing 30 commercial properties for a printer.
Uh-huh.
When they converted from offset press to computer to press, we had to humidify all of our buildings to 40% so that we didn't have static electricity that would zap the memory out of the computers. It would cause a problem for the printing process.
Wow.
But when we humidified our buildings, all of a sudden we had all kinds of condensation issues on the walls and ceilings because they had gaps in the insulation, and because we have cold weather, the warm air would get into that airspace and turn to ice and frost, and then would melt in the spring when it got ambiently warm enough. So we found it's better to insulate on the outside of the structure to keep the outside of the skin of the building warm, which allows you to control the humidity and stuff inside the building a lot better.
That's amazing.
So there's different ways to do it, but vapor drive I've seen the vapor drive actually permeate 12-inch insulation, a wood deck, 2 hot tar roofs, and settle in a spray foam system on top of those 2 roofs.
And it's still penetrated.
And it's still penetrated. The drive was so strong, the humidity was so heavy in the house. The owner was connected with the University of Minnesota. They brought in the building science department at that time. And what they discovered is that the vents for the floor ran through the slab, but they weren't insulated or vapor barriers. So they were carrying all the humidity from the ground below the house into the house. And then it was condensing because it was in a hill and it stayed colder.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the location, and it just created such a strong vapor drive. So what they did is they had to tear up the floor, insulate the vents, and then they revented the building. We put the insulation on the outside, and they were able to solve the problem. But vapor drive is an unseen thing, and you have to believe in the science.
Yeah. We we had our experiences too, working on cold storage, big, huge box buildings that are cold storage, and you cannot have any sort of leakage of any air, especially it was down towards the border of Texas and Mexico, and so it was crazy. literally would not want to use mechanical fasteners. I mean, unless you had to, but even the mechanical fasteners, you have that screw that comes down. Well, it becomes a beacon of the heat into the building.
Oh yeah, it conducts the energy.
Yeah. So it's pretty incredible. But knowing that all edges of the roof, the whole roof has to be sealed tight. Otherwise, it will start raining inside one of those facilities.
Oh yeah, I've been inside. The first roof I ever put white coatings on, they called me in February, and it was raining, and that was my first exposure to how strong vapor drive is, especially when you have long durations of weather that are below zero or below freezing.
Yeah. Where's the sweet spot for buildings somewhere in this country? Like we know that down south, we really can't use a vapor barrier, whereas up north, I know that we have charts that we can find online where there's a major requirement for vapor barriers nowadays.
Well, vapor barrier is a lie to the industry. There's no such thing as a vapor barrier in itself. You have to create a thermal break in order to slow down the vapor drive in order for the vapor retarders to actually work. But there's no such thing as a vapor barrier in itself.
Yeah, well, I think a few manufacturers will sell some Visqueen as a vapor barrier or some sort of
Yeah,
a sheet that.
but it by itself will not stop vapor drive. The vapor still will permeate it. And so the term vapor barrier as a product is a lie to the industry.
Wow.
Unless you have a thermal break. That's why international building insulation codes have been adopted by it. They have found that on low slope roofs, you have to have a minimum, like here in Minnesota, 5.2 insulation isoboard in order to keep that metal structure separated from the cold weather, to keep it from lowering the temperature to 40 degrees, which is dew point.
This is good, guys.
Unless
40 degrees
you don't have
dew
that
point.
thermal break, anytime warm air cools to about 40 degrees, it'll turn back to water.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, it's an easy illustration for everyone is we all know that our soda that's sitting there, if we're outside in the heat, the water it's not water coming out of our cup. It's actually the condensation of the humidity that's in the air.
Yeah. And in the north, it's from the inside out because the warm, humid air is inside the building and the cold, dry air is on the outside. In Texas, it's the opposite.
Wow. So, see, roofers that don't understand this stuff, what sort of problems can they run into?
Well, they can run into all kinds of issues. I think that's part of the reason spray foam doesn't do well in high humidity situations is because a lot of times on the roof, there'll be a thin layer of moisture that you don't see.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll spray foam over it, and it appears as if it's stuck well. And then after a few weather cycles, it's got all kinds of blisters in it because it was just enough moisture for it to dry, but not to really bond the way it's supposed to bond.
Exactly. And then in some cases, I mean, if they're going over a built up or modified cap sheet that may have had some penetration already happening because of some of the leaks, that the roof may actually have some moisture inside it. And when it escapes, it definitely hits that spray foam and can, blister. I haven't seen crevices where it's the moisture inside the building had made that like these little gaps. And when the air conditioning repair guy comes out there, as he's walking on, can crack it. Have you seen things like that happening too because of the encapsulating humidity or moisture?
Same thing happened in the old hot tar roofs, when they did the multi-layer felts. Some of those blisters that developed in the felts after a while was either not enough hot material to stick it, or there might have been just a slight bit of condensation on there.
Mm-hmm.
And then after the sun heats it up, it turns into a vapor, so it expands. And then when it cools off, it shrinks up again because it condenses, because now it's a moisture again.
Wow.
And that's why those blisters would grow. Same thing happens with foam. So not understanding vapor drive, we use a lot of dark primers before we do any of our coatings and stuff, because A darker primer will be black when it's wet, but darker gray when it's dry. And so you have a better visual of what's wet, what's not wet.
Well, that's a great tip for people, That's really neat.
Yeah.
That's really smart. And then how do you prevent, say, if there's actually entrapped moisture because of leaks maybe the building's had, maybe, some of these roofs can be full of moisture, but how?
Yeah.
So
if they're full of moisture, you probably can't, but there are some. I'm working with a manufacturer now out of Cedar Rapids, Iowa, who does restorations with a rubber coating. They install roof vents every 1,200 square feet. They actually cut through the deck, then fill that with insulation, use an insulated one-way vent so they don't create a microclimate. And that allows any vapor to permeate, and they've actually have documentation of drying out roofs.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there is a stopping point. You have to go, okay, this one's too risky to try that on. Right?
Yeah.
And so you have to use the science to determine that. And if you're not educated and you don't focus on trying to understand that, if all you are is tear them off and replace them contractor, then you're not going to have people on staff to keep you out of trouble. So you should try to work with somebody like me that has the background or has had the experience.
Absolutely. And so now when you do consulting, are you consulting for the roofer, or do you consult also for projects with architects? Do you get, called in to design or watch over a commercial roofing project that you may have a roofer that's doing, but you're the one that makes sure that the roofer does it correctly for the owner?
I have done that a few times. New construction's never really been my strong suit because I'm more of the restoration guy. That's where my knowledge is. That's where I'm best at. Yeah. New construction, a lot of times you can work with them on a highest quality, best performing roof they could buy in the industry for that building. But most new construction is handcuffed by a budget. And you can't buy the best performing roof system for the cheapest bid. And a lot of times what happens with new construction projects is they want to spend the money on Italian tile, a better parking lot, higher quality paint, better carpet, because the roof is unseen.
Yeah.
And so many times you can work through the whole process and then budget restraints kick you out at the end.
Yeah.
And then you have to work with something less. And I like to support everything I know with high quality roof systems and good partnerships with suppliers.
Exactly. I so many times that they always want to value engineer the roof, and so many times I'd be speaking with the owners and saying that why would you protect your millions of dollars worth of items underneath that roof and not spend the bare minimum to make sure that it's a high quality, high performance functioning roofing system,
and something that can be restored down the road instead of tore off.
Yeah, I like it. That's awesome.
And so building maintenance programs and that kind of thing for the customer too. Building science is the best way I describe it, because the building science that was done through my continuing education. No, they do a blower door test, and that shows in the building where their transition point where warm air meets cold. As soon as I sat through that, it's like, holy crap, that's what's going on inside the building. It allowed me to connect building science to vapor drive, to condensation issues, to vapor retarders and all those kind of things. So like I said, a better educated customer, a better service customer is going to more apt to just give you more work than to make you compete against another contractor for work.
Yeah. And that's what happens. That's what we teach a lot with Roofing Business Builder is to get into a specific niche where you've reduced your competition drastically, and then do a good job and develop those relationships. And there's plenty of relationships out there where you're not taking away roofs from another roofing company, but you're actually creating your own business. And that way everyone wins. I believe in everyone winning,
My whole business has been built on relationship and over servicing the customer better than everybody else. I don't really spend a lot of money on marketing, and so once I win a customer, I want to keep them because it's cheaper to keep them than try to find a new one all the time.
Yeah. And that's the beauty about for crossing over to commercial, because once you have just a handful of those that have maybe 120 buildings, you know what I mean? It's kind of a great relationship to have, and that they know that that's my roofer, you know, that Stan's my
exactly
roofer.
Right. Yep. No, that's exactly right.
So how did you get into the roofing industry?
Well, I was a machine builder. I was a machinist that built custom machines, and I was kind of a wild child, racing cars, and my budget consisted of beer and car parts. And I knew I needed to get out of that lifestyle. So while I was building machines, I bought a mobile home, and they told us there weren't very many flexible roofing products out there that, I had to roof them twice a year because everything was brittle. And I just happened to run into, while I was looking for a winter beater to put one of my Camaros away for the winter, ran into a guy that was selling Conklin roofing products. It was a elastomeric coating. It was only a year on the market. It was white, stretchy. And so I bought some and put it on my mobile home, and they kept inviting me to meetings. I went to the meetings and then started dabbling in the roofing. And in the 80s, when machine building kind of went south and nobody was spending any money, I did some aerospace work as well, and they weren't spending money on military. I decided to make the leap and sold the company to switch from hot tar to spray foam and started doing hotels nationwide. And then when I got married in 86, I just moved back home and started building a roofing business, and we've just been transitioning ever since, but in the roofing industry and specializing in restoration.
Wow, that is so cool. I always say that you don't choose the roofing industry, the roofing industry chooses you. So that's kind of, you know what I mean? It binds you, right. It stalks you.
It does, and I've been able to become a specialist in finding hard to solve leaks. And so, it's worked out well for me.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, so we've been very fortunate.
So do you have any advice that you could give to roofers that are, getting into this, let's say they've been residential, but just been a shingle person, but if they're moving into more of low slope, people call them flat roofs, but if you're talking to an architect, we always say low slope.
Yes, low slope. Yeah.
but you have any advice for those people that are transitioning into that? So that the way they don't waste time and don't lose a ton of money, don't get in a lawsuit. But what would you first suggest to those people before they even attempt to take on some of these very difficult type of projects?
Well, I'd first understand you got to get educated yourself enough to know the basics. So partner with somebody that you're comfortable with to get educated on, find a good solid manufacturer to stand behind you with good quality product, and don't take on anything too big right away. Take on small projects, get your guys to learn about how to work with roof coatings and how it relates to weather and to understand how roofs work, and then go after the bigger stuff.
Yeah,
the bigger stuff will find you, but you have to focus on understanding what you're doing, not just doing it, because that's what everybody else does. They tear off this roof, then they put part A, part B, part C. If you spend time to get educated and educate your customer, you'll have long-term customers. And if you're going to be in this business for a while, the most important thing is to be educated and learn to build relationships.
That's beautiful. Wow, Stan, such great advice. Any books that you'd suggest for anyone to read?
Any books? In the early days, I had a lot of self-improvement books because I wasn't a very good student. And so I didn't have a very big self-esteem. So I worked a lot on self-improvement. So guys like Bob Conklin and Norman Vincent Peale and Zig Ziglar and all those guys were like mentors to me because they helped me change my mindset to grow and believe that I could do whatever. And then through experience, I learned I knew stuff other people didn't know. And so I would say today there's a lot of new guys out there that are professional speakers that help you grow as a person. But if we're not healthy, if we're not strong as a person, we can't help other people. So that, I don't want that to sound selfish, but we have to be strong and educated in order to be good leaders for the people that follow us.
Yeah, mindset is a super important one. Yeah, Zig Ziglar was one of mine.
Everything's mindset. I don't care what anybody says. You have to have the right mindset to learn, to grow, to take care of your customers, to have a good relationship, to have a good marriage, to be good parents. It's all mindset. You can't just wake up in the morning and do. You have to have a purpose.
Also, Stan, where can people find you if they need it, if they want to get in touch with you?
They could find me just stan@volkman.info, or they could go to Facebook and find me on my Facebook page. I'm always changing my website, so I'm in the middle of changing some websites right now, so I'd rather not send them there. But if they just go to Facebook and type in Stan Volkman, they'll find me. Yeah. Even if they Google my name, they'll find me. I've got plenty of stuff on the internet, I guess. So.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's Volkman, and thanks for recording this while you're driving throughout. Was it South Dakota?
Nope, I'm in northern Minnesota. I just got into Fargo, North Dakota. Beautiful Fargo, North Dakota.
Wow, Fargo, North Dakota. Super thankful for you being on the show. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed the conversation I had with your wife at the show, and I've enjoyed today very much too.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
So that was my interview with Stan Volkman. So many things that he got to share with us that we can really internalize and use that information to not only protect our companies, but help our companies grow. I hope you benefited from the show. And now it's time for Did You Know? Did you know that you can prevent problems like moisture in that roofing system by doing a core cut? All you have to do is do a core cut, right? You should be doing up to 10 core cuts on any roof that you're getting on. But what some people don't realize is that you really should do the core cuts in the really bad, nasty areas. So sometimes when we get up on that roof and we're not experienced in the roofing, we want that job so bad that we only do a core cut in a certain spots where we know there's not going to be a bunch of moisture that you're going to find there because it's maybe high up. But don't do that. Why? Just like we learned in the show today, that if we do something like that, we might be wanting to get the job, but if we run into problems because we didn't find areas that were problem areas, well, that's going to reflect back on your company name. So be sure to do core cuts to make sure there's no moisture in that roof, and also be sure that when you do those core cuts, you do them in the problem areas. Now, granted, you can do them in the good areas, but do them in the problem areas too, because you really want to make sure that that roof's done right, because it's your name. So, guys, that's it for the Roofing Business Builder podcast. Looking forward. Thank you so much for your support, all you guys that are listening to those trucks. Hey, let's make some money together. Let's do this. We're building amazing roofing businesses, and I'm just so happy to be a part of your life too. And by the way, you can also schedule a strategy call with me if you're looking at joining the Roofing Business Builder program, and that's for roofers that are in the commercial business, or if you're crossing over, I can help you grow your business into the millions in just a short period of time, because a lot of the things that we are doing in this business, there's a lot of mistakes that can cost a lot of money, and so I can speed you up with helping you to download this information in just about 6 weeks, and then you still will have access to me if you run into some situations that you don't know how to get out of. And so, but that's it. So until then, until the next podcast, just remember, I don't always consult on commercial roofing, but when I do, I make millionaires. Stay wealthy, my friends.